One of the issues that has cropped up in this election, although not a major issue, but one that has cropped up a few times in discussion circles, discussion forums, I should say, is drugs policy. And it's been particularly focused on the Liberal Democrat forums as a Liberal Democrat talking point, because this is something the party has long been known for, taking a more lenient liberal approach to drug policy. At present, both the Labour and Conservative Party take a hard line in that we should just retain the current situation, which is a large number of drugs are illegal for recreational use. The only ones that aren't actually is alcohol and tobacco. Now, just looking through the comments, I'd say about 90% of them were for some sort of legalization with regulation. And the general consensus is that the war on drugs has failed. That is something I consistently see on almost any videos actually about drug policy. But I think one issue that I have with this is that although I'm sympathetic to the argument because I know where it's coming from, I know the logic behind it, and I am sympathetic to that because obviously what is the situation now is not working, at least not as well as it could be. Um, so broadly speaking, I'm in favour of legalization of some drugs. For example, legalization of marijuana, I don't have a major problem with that. I don't see that as being a major um, barrier in my own line of thinking. I would have a big problem with legalization of other drugs. Um, there is one comment though that I came across, and I hadn't thought about this point before, and the guy who made it, I thought it was a very valid and intelligent point. What he said was, billions have been spent on um, anti-tobacco advertising, the sort of tobacco warnings and efforts to try and stop people smoking. Similar sort of campaigns have been launched to stop people binge drinking. Um, Various initiatives, various programs have been launched by a wide body of people, a wide range of bodies, I should say, whether it be police forces or the NHS itself or government agencies. There's been a wide range of initiatives to try and stop people abusing alcohol and tobacco. And it's cost a very large amount of money. Now, the point he made was at present, cannabis use is illegal. If we legalize it, and let's presume it's widely used, and let's say it does cause health problems, I don't believe that any drug is harmless. Let's say it does cause health problems, then what if we just have health warnings in the same way as tobacco and alcohol, and it's like we're beginning the whole process again. Now, alcohol and tobacco have been around for, especially because of alcohol, millennia. Tobacco has been in this country for over 400 years, and I know people are going to say that certain drugs were used by Victorian writers and so on. I'm aware of that, but I think it's a bit naive to just say that there's no difference between the drugs that are currently illegal and alcohol, tobacco, when there is some very obvious differences. If someone drinks too much can affect their behaviour. They can get violent, they can get rowdy, depending on the type of person. A lot of other people just get a bit silly, or they laugh a lot, or something like that. Um, Alcohol certainly does cause problems. It causes a huge amount in terms of antisocial behaviour. It costs the NHS a hell of a lot of money, and so does tobacco. Over 100,000 people a year die from lung cancer. But look what happened when alcohol was banned in the Prohibition era in the United States. You had organised crime increase. Now, the same argument is used for decriminalising personal drug use. And on the surface, that sounds fair enough. I think there is an argument to be made that cannabis should be decriminalised, because I would say that cannabis is, to me, I don't know all the details, but to me, I don't see it being much worse than tobacco, possibly less harmful. But I know there is arguments that it causes paranoia and schizophrenia. I'm not I'm not a doctor. I don't know the ins and outs of that. Okay, so I don't want to comment in detail about the health impact of something like cannabis. However, you don't need to be an expert on biology or on health issues to see that something like crystal meth or cocaine or heroin is some bad shit, to put it one way. So I wouldn't have a major problem with legalizing cannabis and regulating it and not glamorizing it, i.e., not having going along the same approach of alcohol and tobacco as it currently is, not excessively advertising them. Um, so okay, legalize cannabis, make it available, but don't market it. Um, I would be broadly sympathetic to that, but I would feel very, very uneasy with the notion of, you could go down to Tesco's and buy your crystal meth off the shelf. To me, that is just madness, and that is far more reckless than whatever flaws the war on drugs has, because I don't know how anyone could possibly argue that those sort of drugs wouldn't have an implication. I think it's very naive to say, oh, it's all just for personal use. That's all very well, but what about drugs that really, really do have a definite impact on someone's coherence, on their psychological behavior, etc.? I know people are going to say, well, alcohol does that as well, but not for everyone. That is the difference. Not for everyone. There are people who can't control their booze. But in the case of drugs, it doesn't matter who you are, you take that shit, it's going to have an impact. So that is a fundamental difference, and I think that's being overlooked in this debate. I'm also concerned that it would send out the message if a major political party was to legalize all this stuff, and I'm well aware that there are strong arguments for that. I'm just concerned about the message it sends out. So if we do go down that line, it needs to be coupled with health warnings as well, saying that we're going to legalize this in order to end the never-ending problems caused by the war on drugs, but we also recognize that these are dangerous things, and they should be regulated, and there should be some controls in terms of there should be a limit on how much drug companies would be able to advertise, for example, as a recreational drug. Well, actually, I'd be opposed to them advertising that at all. I mean, let's get real here. Imagine you're watching a documentary and then suddenly an advert comes up and says, "Oh, buy your ecstasy from this outlet or whatever." I just can't. I don't know how that would work. So I think people aren't thinking this entirely through. They're looking at one factor, which is that the war on drugs has in many ways been a failure, and that is a fair argument. But I'm concerned that too many people are not really thinking of the consequences. I mean, people keep quoting Portugal. Um, it's my understanding that in Portugal it's largely been a successful program. They've legalized all drugs, and there's been no noticeable change in terms of crime levels and so on, which is the fear of conservatives, for example, of legalizing all drugs. But just because it works in Portugal is not a guarantee that it will work in the UK. Different countries sometimes have different contexts, and whilst it's good to learn from other countries, it doesn't mean that because it works there, it will work everywhere else. I mean, most of the world takes the view that there are certain drugs that are so destructive they simply should be illegal. I also take a view on this, and this might be taboo, this might be controversial, but I have to say this. I do think personal responsibility comes into this. I'm well aware that someone who's addicted to drugs, it can, it's beyond their control when they get to that stage. But I don't have a lot of sympathy for someone who's a free thinking adult who voluntarily approaches a drug dealer and purchases something they know is illegal. Now, they're knowingly committing a crime. Let's not overlook that fact. They're knowingly committing a crime, and to me, that's, well, it's illegal, so why are you doing it? I mean, call me old fashioned, but that's, it's not like a free speech issue. It's not something it's illegal, and it's, why would you do that? I really don't understand why someone would put that shit into their bodies. Okay, that's just my own opinion, but I think it is incredibly naive to say that personal drug use has no effect on other people. That is just beyond stupidity. Of course it does. And yes, alcohol and tobacco can also have those implications. But I really don't think you can compare an average beer drinker, someone who occasionally enjoys a drink but they are responsible about it, to someone taking crystal meth, because there's no such thing as being a responsible crystal meth user. I'm sorry, but there's not. Because drugs are that powerful, completely consume your entire, and I'm sure there's other examples out there. So I just think we need to be wary about this, and I'm a little bit uneasy about the way so many people are trivializing this. Like, oh, the war on drugs has failed. Let's just legalize everything and it'll all be perfect. That's, to me, is incredibly naive. Um, it may well be true that there is a strong argument that the war on drugs has failed. Okay, I get that. But if we're going to go down the path of legalization, it needs to be done in a very, very responsible way. And no responsible political party should send out a message. And I'm not accusing the Liberal Democrats of this, but I'm just saying if it does go down this line, they should do it in tandem with saying, but we also recognize that we do not want to encourage this. We're legalizing it because it's a practical thing to do, but we're in no way encouraging it. That is something I can get on board with. Um, but anyone who wants to argue that any of this shit is harmless, I've not got much time for that debate, I'm afraid, because it just is against common sense. I mean, you cannot tell me that putting a powerful chemical into your bloodstream isn't going to have an impact on your health. Of course it is. Just like if you drink too much, it will have an impact on your health. Or if you smoke 3 packets a day, you're going to get lung cancer. Well, we can see the problems already caused by alcohol and tobacco. So for goodness sake, if we're going to go down the line of legalization, let's be responsible about it. And I think what that guy said about the whole process starting over again, I think it's a valid point. So I'll just conclude with this. I believe drugs are terrible. I hate drugs. I hate the influence they have. I hate the health problems they cause people. Um, but I do recognize there is a strong argument to be had that the war on drugs needs to end. But in terms of responsibility, I would also say someone who commits a crime whilst they're on drugs, um, is it a mitigating factor? Well, if they, as a responsible adult, well, as a free-thinking adult, chose to take the drugs, I'm afraid I don't have much sympathy, because that is another aspect that I see. It seems to me that, I'm not devoid of compassion here. I believe that someone who is using drugs for dealing with maybe bereavement or whatever the reason is, there's various reasons why people take drugs, but I do support a compassionate approach in terms of offering treatment, but I don't support any sort of notion that if someone commits a crime, then they should be treated leniently. If they are ruining someone else's life because of their own disgusting habit, then, you can call that judgmental, but I'm only thinking about the people that they are hurting. And that's something that is overlooked in all of this. If if we're talking about a private individual who is using drugs to overcome a certain situation and they're not hurting anyone else, I have sympathy for that person. I do. So I'm not heartless, and I'm not sort of like, but someone who is jacked up on heroin and then goes and mugs an old woman, don't tell me we should feel sorry for that sort of scumbag. No. So yeah, that's my position. Let me know your thoughts.